from Kansas is not wrong. In the 237 years of our nation's history, I don't know that there has been a more shameful day in the United States Senate than today. What we just witnessed was a travesty. It was a travesty to the United States Constitution, and it was a travesty to the American people. And it's important to understand why the Democrats did what they did. We're here on the Senate floor right now, but I want the record to reflect I'm going to do a very accurate count of the number of Democrats who are with us. That would be 0, other than the presiding officer, and somebody has to preside. Not a single Democrat senator chose to come to this floor and listen to one word of evidence. When it comes to the Constitution, the Democrats concluded that Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas, defying federal law, ignoring the text of the statute, deliberately releasing criminal illegal aliens over and over and over again, that's just hunky-dory. You can't impeach him for that. Every Democrat just voted. By the way, every cabinet member, guess what? You've just been given a blank slate. Ignore the law. When Democrats are in charge of the Senate, the entire cabinet could ignore the law. It is no longer impeachable. In Democrat wonderland, when a member of the executive branch openly defies the law. By the way, every Democrat just voted that way. They didn't hear one word of argument. The majority leader didn't stand up and say, here's the reason why it's okay. No, he didn't present that argument. They didn't read a brief. Nobody wrote a brief. They didn't care enough to know what Senator Lee just laid out, that the Biden Department of Justice went in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and said if the executive defies the law, the answer is impeachment. The willingness of every Democrat to be blatantly hypocritical. Just last year, the Biden Justice Department said, no, you can't sue in court when we, the Biden administration, defy the law. The answer is impeachment. In like 3-card money. Every Senate Democrat said, no, the answer is not impeachment. I don't know what it is. Actually, I do know what it is. There's only one answer left, which is everyone who is unhappy about the open border shows up in November, and to use the phrase, throw the bums out. Because if you're not willing to do your job, is there not one senator on that side of the aisle who cares enough to honor the Constitution? By the way, the second article they threw out said lying to Congress is not a high crime or misdemeanor, it's not impeachable. Now, as the senator from South Carolina pointed out, Bill Clinton was impeached for lying under oath. And you know what happened? And he was ultimately acquitted. But after a full trial where they heard the evidence, where the Senate did its job. By the way, one of the impeachment managers was Senator Graham, who presented that evidence right here on this floor. And you know what? Before Bill Clinton, there's a guy named Walter Nixon. You may not know who Walter Nixon is. Walter Nixon was a federal judge who was convicted of perjury. He was from Mississippi. He was convicted of perjury in front of a grand jury. And he was impeached. And it went to the Senate, and the Senate convicted him and removed him from the bench. So you want to know what the precedents were prior to today? You commit a crime, lying under oath, perjury, it is a high crime or misdemeanor that is impeachable. No more. Because understand the Democrats' rule here. This is not about the Constitution. None of them care. By the way, we repeatedly moved. Let's go into debate. Hear the other side of the argument. Nope. Look, the famous 3 monkeys, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. That's just evil, what they did. They don't want to know because they don't care, because it's not about the Constitution. It's not about the law. It is about political expediency. But every bit as violent as what they did to the Constitution was, it's even more offensive what they did to the American people. Last year, 853 migrants died crossing illegally into this country. That's almost 3 a day. You go down to the southern border, you go down to Texas, what the Democrats don't bother to do because they don't care about the people dying, and you see photograph after photograph that Texas farmers and ranchers are finding of dead bodies on their property. Many of my colleagues here have been down there with me, have seen the elderly people the human traffickers have abandoned, have seen the pregnant women the human traffickers have abandoned, have seen the infants and toddlers left to die. The Senate Democrats just told the American people they don't give a damn about the bodies and the people who have died the last 3.5 years, and they don't give a damn about the people that are going to die next week. Next week, more migrants are going to die. When we brought 19 senators down to the border, we went out on a boat in the Rio Grande. We saw a man floating dead in the water. Senator Lee was there. Senator Kennedy was there. He had died that day. The Democrats just told the American people they don't care. When you go down to the border and you look at the children who've been brutalized, just about all of us here are parents. I will tell you, when you look in the eye of a little girl or a little boy who's been abused by traffickers, and you see it, you see the pain, you see the agony of children trapped in sex trafficking, the Democrats just said they don't care. They won't hear the evidence, they don't care that it's deliberate, and they don't care that it'll happen next week, that it'll happen tomorrow. Tomorrow there will be children brutalized because of the Democrats' open border policies, and not a one of them cares. They don't care about the women who are repeatedly sexually assaulted. Again, when you look in the eyes of these women coming over, it's heartbreaking. And the Democrats just said, we don't care. And they don't care about the more than 100,000 Americans that died last year from drug overdoses. The highest in our nation's history. 70% of that is from Chinese fentanyl coming across our southern border. And the Democrats said, we don't want to hear about it. We're not interested in the Americans dying. You know what they also don't care about? They don't care about the criminals that are being released day after day after day. The Biden administration is releasing murderers and rapists and child molesters, and every week we see another story of somebody being killed, somebody being raped, another child being assaulted by illegal immigrants released by Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden. How shocking is it that there wasn't one Democrat who says, you know, massive human suffering matters? We ought to hear the evidence. How shocking is it that there wasn't one Democrat, one, there are 51 of them on that side, not a single one could screw up the courage to say, let's do our job, let's hear the evidence. How shocking is it that not a Democrat cares about the terrorists who are streaming across our southern border? The nation of Iran has called for jihad against America. Hamas has called for jihad against America. Hezbollah has called for jihad against America. And Joe Biden and the Democrats have put out a red carpet and said, if you want to murder Americans, come across our southern border, and we, the Democrats, will welcome you. Like many of us on this floor, I was in Washington, D.C. on September 11th, 2001. I remember the horror. I lost a good friend, Barbara Olson, who was in the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. I remember the smell of smoke and sulfur and burning. I remember the agony, and I remember the national unity that came after 9/11. As Democrats and Republicans came together, I don't know that I've ever been more proud of a president than when President George W. Bush stood on a pile of rubble with a bullhorn, talking to firefighters and New Yorkers, and one of the men in the crowd called out and said, "We can't hear you," and he responded, "Well, I can hear you, and soon the whole world is going to hear you as well." We were as one. Today, not a single Democrat was able to mount up the courage to tell the majority leader, you know what, I don't want another 9/11 to happen. The House impeached Alejandro Mayorkas for, among other things, releasing terrorist after terrorist after terrorist. We ought to hear the evidence. I believe today we have a greater risk of a major terrorist attack on U.S. soil than at any point since September 11th. And every Democrat just told the American people it doesn't matter to them to hear the evidence. I appreciate my Republican colleagues who are here, who are willing to hear the evidence, willing to engage, willing to stand up and defend the American people. But you know what? The Democrats who aren't here, they aren't here because you know who's also not here? If you look up at the gallery, the reporters are all gone. A couple of folks in the back, I hope you all right. But the reporters are absent. That's the Democrats' plan. What is fascinating, we're presenting arguments. Many of us, particularly those of us in judiciary, but many of us have presented those arguments over and over and over again in hearings. Not a Democrat argues on the other side. It's an issue unlike any other issue I know of in politics. Listen, if we're arguing about taxes, as Republicans, we say we should cut taxes. It's good for the American people. And you know what Democrats do? They stand up. We know their talking points. No, tax the rich. Okay, fine. We have a debate. We're talking about just about every issue. The Democrats will argue on the other side. They have their spin. What is fascinating? Where's Dick Durbin, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, standing up saying, no, it's not right that migrants are dying every day. No, it's not right that children are being assaulted every day. No, it's not right that women are being sexually assaulted every day. No, it's not right that they're releasing terrorists every day. They're not there. Not a Democrat is there. Why? Because you cannot defend it. I'll tell you, South Texas for 100+ years has been a Democrat region of our state. It is turning red with the speed of a freight locomotive because nobody can see the suffering that is unfolding and defend it. And the Democrats, by their silence and by the complicity of the press corps, they are counting on the press corps to write story. Victory for the Democrats, yay! They got rid of the impeachment trial. That's the headline they want. Understand they don't have a substantive defense. None of them disputes a word we are saying. Not a single Democrat has stood up and said, you know, it's wrong that Laken Riley would still be alive if Joe Biden hadn't let her murderer go. They know it's right. The reason they didn't want a trial is they don't want the American people to hear about it. And it's our obligation.
I thank the chairman. And it is interesting that, again, parliamentary inquiries, and I believe some are actually some of the things I'm going to discuss today because we're sort of coming here today in a different arena. Look, for everybody who's not been here before, this is a new room, it's new rules, it's a new month. We've even got cute little stickers for our staff so we can come in because we want to make this important. And this is impeachment because we've done such a terrible job of it in this committee before. But what's not new is basically what's just been reiterated by the chairman. What's not new is the facts. What's not new is it's the same sad story. What's interesting, even before I get into my part of my opening statement is just what was just said by the chairman. We went back to a redo of Mr. Mueller. We're also saying, quoting him, saying the attention of the American people should be on foreign interference. I agree with him completely, except I guess the American people did not include the Judiciary Committee because we didn't take it up. We didn't have hearings. We didn't do anything to delve deeply into this issue. We passed election bills, but did not get into the in-depth part of what Mr. Mueller talked about, taking his own report and having hearings about that. We didn't do it. So I guess the American people doesn't include the House Judiciary Committee. You know, we also just heard an interesting discussion. We're going to have a lot of interesting discussion today about the Constitution and other things, but we also talked about the founders. What's interesting is that the chairman talked a lot about the founders from the quotes, and again, this is why we have the hearing, about the founders being concerned about foreign influence, but what he also didn't quote was the founders being really, really concerned about political impeachment because you just don't like the guy. You haven't liked him since November of 2016. The chairman has talked about impeachment since last year when he was elected chairman, 2 years ago, on November 6th, 17th, before he's even sworn in as chairman. So don't tell me this is about new evidence and new things and new stuff. We may have a new hearing room, we may have new mics, and we may have chairs that aren't comfortable, but this is nothing new, folks. This is sad. So what do we have here today? You know what I'm thinking? I looked at this, and what is interesting is there's two things that have become very clear. This impeachment is not really about facts. If it was, I believe the other committees would have sent over recommendations for impeachment. No, they're putting it on this committee because if it goes badly, I guess they want to blame Adam Schiff's committee and the HIPC and others want to blame this committee for it going bad. But they're already drafting articles. Don't be fooled. They're already getting ready for this. We've already went after this with the Ukraine after numerous failings of Mueller, Cohen, annulments, the list goes, emoluments, the list goes on. But the American people are actually failing to see us legislate. But if you want to know what's really driving this, there's two things. It's called the clock and the calendar. The clock and the calendar. Most people in life, if you want to know what they truly value, you look at their checkbook and their calendar. You know what they value. That's what this committee values. Time. They want to do it before the end of the year. Why? Because the chairman said it just a second ago. Because we're scared of the elections next year. We're scared of the elections that we'll lose again. So we've got to do this now. The clock and the calendar are what's driving impeachment, not the facts. When we understand this, that's what the witnesses here will say today. What do we have here today? What is really interesting over today and for the next few weeks is America will see why most people don't go to law school. No offense to our professors. But please, really, we're bringing you in here today to testify on stuff that most of you have already written about, all four, for the opinions that we already know, out of the classrooms that maybe you're getting ready for finals in, to discuss things that you probably haven't even had a chance to say. Unless you're really good on TV or watching the hearings for the last couple of weeks, you couldn't have possibly actually digested the Adam Schiff report from yesterday or the Republican response in any real way. Now, we can be theoretical all we want, but the American people is really going to look at this and say, huh? What are we doing? Because there's no fact witnesses planned for this committee. That's an interesting thing. Frankly, there's no plan at all except next week an ambiguous hearing on the presentation from the HIPC, the other committee that sent us the report, and Judiciary Committee, which I'm not still sure what they want us to present on, and nothing else. No plan. I asked the chairman before we left for Thanksgiving to stay in touch. Let's talk about what we have because history will shine a bright light on us starting this morning. Crickets. Until I asked for a witness the other day, and let's just say that didn't go well. There's no whistleblower. And by the way, it was proved today that he's not or she's not afforded the protection of identity. It's not in the statute. It's just something that was discussed by Adam Schiff. We also don't have Adam Schiff, who wrote the report. He said yesterday in a press conference, I'm not going to. I'll send staff to do that. He's not going to, but you know, to me, if he was wanting to, he'd come begging to us. But you know, here's the problem. It sums it up very simply like this. Just 19 minutes after noon on Inauguration Day 2017, the Washington Post ran the headline, "The campaign to impeach the president has begun." Mark Zadd, who would later become the attorney for the infamous whistleblower, tweeted in January 2017, "The coup has started. The impeachment will follow ultimately." And in May of this year, Al Green says if we don't impeach the president, he'll get re-elected. If you want to know what's happening, here we go. Why did everything that I say up to this point about no fact witnesses, nothing for the Judiciary Committee, which spent 2.5 weeks before this hearing was even held under Clinton, 2.5 weeks. We didn't even find your names out until less than 48 hours ago. I don't know what we're playing hide the ball on. It's pretty easy what you're going to say. But we can't even get that straight. So what are we doing for the next 2 weeks? I have no idea. The chairman just said an ambiguous hearing on the report, but nothing else. If we're going to simply not have fact witnesses, then we are the rubber stamp hiding out back, the very rubber stamp the chairman talked about 20 years ago. What a disgrace to this committee. To have the committee of impeachment simply take from other entities and rubber stamp it. You see, why do the things that I say matter about fact witnesses and actually hearing and actually having this a due process? Because, by the way, just a couple of months ago, the Democrats got all sort of dressed up, if you would, and says, we're going to have due process protection for the president and good fairness throughout this. This is the only committee in which the president would even have a possibility. But no offense to you, the law professors. The president has nothing to ask you. You're not going to provide anything he can't read. And his attorneys have nothing else. Put witnesses in here that they can be fact witnesses who can be actually cross-examined. That's fairness, and every attorney on this panel knows that. This is a sham. But you know, what I also see here is quotes like this. There must never be a narrowly voted impeachment or an impeachment supported by one of our major political parties or imposed by another. Such an impeachment will produce divisiveness, bitterness in politics for years to come and will call into question the very legitimacy of our political institutions. The American people are watching. They will not forget. You have the votes. You may have the muscle, but you do not have the legitimacy of a national consensus or of a constitutional imperative. The partisan coup d'etat will go down in infamy in the history of the nation. How about this one? I think the key point is that the Republicans are still running a railroad job with no attempt at fair procedure. And today, when the Democrats offered amendments, offered motions in committee to say we should first discuss and adopt standards so that we know we're dealing with, standards for impeachment that was voted down or ruled out of order. When we say the important thing is to start looking at the question before we simply have a vote with no inquiry first, that was voted down and ruled out of order. So frankly, the whole question of what material should be released and what is secondary, but that's all we discussed. The essential question, and here it is, which is to set up a fair process as to whether the country put this country through an impeachment proceeding. That was ruled out of order. The Republicans refused to let us discuss it. Those are all Chairman Nadler before he was chairman. I guess 20 years makes a difference. This is an interesting time. We're having a factless impeachment. You just heard a one-sided presentation of facts about this president. Today we will present the other side, which it gets so conveniently left out. Remember, fairness does dictate that, but maybe not here because we're not scheduling anything else. I have a Democratic majority who has poll tested what they think they ought to call what the president they think he did. Wow, that's not following the facts. We have just a deep-seated hatred of a man who came to the White House and did what he said he was going to do. The most amazing question I got in the first 3 months of this gentleman's presidency from reporters was this: can you believe he's putting forward those ideas? I said, yes, he ran on them. He told the truth, and he did what he said. The problem here today is this will also be one of the first impeachments the chairman mentioned. There was two of them, one that before he resigned before, and then one in Clinton, in which the facts, even by Democrats and Republicans, were not really disputed. In this one, they're not only disputed, they're contradicted of each other. There are no set facts here. In fact, there's not anything that presents an impeachment here, except a president carrying out his job in the way the Constitution saw that he sees fit to do it. This is where we're at today. So the interesting thing that I come to with most everybody here is this may be a new time, a new place, and we may be all scrubbed up and looking pretty for impeachment. But this is not an impeachment. This is just a simple railroad job. And today's is a waste of time because this is where we're at. So I close today with this. It didn't start with Mueller. It didn't start with a phone call. You know where this started? It started with tears in Brooklyn in November 2016 when an election was lost. So we are here, no plan, no fact witnesses, simply being a rubber stamp for what we have. But hey, we got law professors here. What a start of a party.
As I have said,
further reserving the right to object.
As I have said, the point of order would be in order at the meeting where we are considering articles.
Further reserving the right to object.
We will now hear presentations.
Mr. Chairman, I appeal the decision of the chair.
There is no decision to appeal. There was not a ruling and a motion. We will now hear presentations.
A ruling on the point of order.
You made a ruling on the point of order.
You made a ruling on the point of order, Mr. Chairman. You can't then not allow us to appeal the ruling of the chair.
The gentleman will suspend. It was not a cognizable point of order. It was not a cognizable point of order. It was not in order at this time to make that point of order. There is no ruling to appeal.
But Mr. Chairman, the rule was the obligation, not consideration. You are obligated to schedule, not to consider. You made a ruling. It is in order to appeal.
The gentleman will suspend. We are doing what we have to do under the rules. We will now hear presentations of evidence.
Mr. Chairman,
the gentleman is not recognized. We will now hear presentations of evidence.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
I haven't removed my objection yet.
I will not recognize a parliamentary inquiry at this time. We will now hear presentations of evidence from counsels to the judiciary.
Is this when we just hear staff ask questions of other staff and the members get dealt out of this whole hearing? And for the next 4 hours, you're going to try to overturn the result of an election with unelected people giving testimony?
Gentlemen will suspend.